A light broke in upon my brain. It was the carol of a bird. It ceased, and then it came again, the sweetest song I ever heard. And mine was thankful till my eyes ran over with the glad surprise, and they that moment could not see I was the mate of misery. But then by dull degrees came back my senses to their wonted track. I saw the dungeon walls and floor close slowly round me as before. I saw the glimmer of the sun creeping as it before had done, but through the crevice where it came, that bird was perched, as fond and tame, and tamer than upon the tree. A lovely bird with azure wings, a song that said 1,000 things, and seemed to say them all for me. I never saw its like before, I ne'er shall see its likeness more. It seemed to me to want a mate, but was not half so desolate. And it was come to love me when none lived to love me so again, and cheering from my dungeon's brink, had brought me back to feel and think. I know not if it late were free, or broke its cage to perch on mine, but knowing so well captivity, sweet bird, I could not wish for thine. Or if it were a winged guise, a visitant from paradise, for, heaven forgive that thought, the while which made me both weep and smile. I sometimes deemed that it might be my brother's soul come down to me, but then at last away it flew, and then 'twas mortal well I knew, for he would never thus have flown, and left me twice so doubly lone. Lone as the corse within its shroud, lone as a solitary cloud, a single cloud on a sunny day, while all the rest of heaven is clear, a frown upon the atmosphere, that hath no business to appear, when skies are blue and earth is gay. The Prisoner of Chillon. Unhappily, all these shifting scenes of imagination or experience, so the poet has made mournful confession, have little power to wean him from himself. Neither the music of the shepherd, the crashing of the avalanche, nor the torrent, the mountain, the glacier, the forest, nor the cloud, have for one moment lightened the weight upon my heart, nor enabled me to lose my own wretched identity in the majesty, and the power, and the glory, above, around, and beneath me. And although it will be noticed, he exempts the sea, and although the blood of old sea-kings running fiercely in his veins, still kindles him to imperishable rapture in its presence. And I have loved thee, ocean, and my joy of youthful sports was on thy breast to be, borne, like thy bubbles, onward, from a boy. I wantoned on thy breakers, they to me were a delight, and if the freshening sea made them a terror, 'twas a pleasing fear, for I was as it were a child of thee, and trusted to thy billows far and near, and laid my hand upon thy mane, as I do here. Childe Harold. Yet there is sorrow on the sea itself, the unplumbed salt estranging sea, which separates him from his mother country. Cosmopolitan as he is, self-banished exile, quick with Greek and Italian sympathies, Byron never for one moment forgets that he is the head of one of England's proudest families. Despite his scathing scorn towards his fair-weather London friends, towards the unreasoning outbursts of malignity which drove him out of his England, with all her faults, he loves her still. He vaguely hopes and hankers after a return to those long-lost shores, and endeavours to believe that the future will in some way make atonement for all the calamities of the past. But now Shelley, Williams, Medwin, and Taaffe are dismounting in the pine forest, and the men-servants setting up the target. Pistol practice is Byron's forte. When he hits a half-crown at 12 yards, he is as delighted as a boy, and quite glum and disconcerted if he should happen to miss. This very rarely happens, as he is a crack shot, easily distancing the other competitors. His hand trembles violently, but he calculates on this vibration, and depending entirely on his eye, hardly ever fails. After about an hour's shooting, the light begins to wane towards sunset, and the friends ride back to the city. Byron in exuberant good humour with himself and everyone else. Arrived at the Palazzo Lanfranchi, he finds 2 guests awaiting him, Count Pietro Gamba, brother of the lovely Contessa Giudice, and Trelawney, that handsome, picturesque, piratical-looking younger son, who has not yet published to an astonished world his remarkable and almost incredible adventures. Trelawney is at present in command of Byron's yacht, the Bolivar, lying in the harbour of Genoa. The poet welcomes these new additions to his company, for since his arrival in Pisa he has begun to entertain men at dinner parties, for the first time since leaving England. A very cheerful company sits down with him to dinner. Their host displays himself to great advantage, being at once, to quote Shelley, polite and cordial, full of social hilarity and the most perfect good humour, never diverging into ungraceful merriment, and yet keeping up the spirit of liveliness throughout the evening. Byron, according to his own declaration, has never passed 2 hours in mixed society without wishing himself out of it again. Nobody, however, could guess at this fact from his bright, frank, and spontaneous gaiety. Always an abstemious eater, I have fed at times for over 2 months together, he assures his friends, on sheer biscuit and water. Very little food suffices him, and besides, bien entendu, he is anxious to retain that happy slenderness on which he prides himself. The slenderness which is a characteristic of his family, and which he has recently endangered by a lazy life in Venice. The guests sit fascinated by his enthralling personality. They recognize that he wears a natural greatness which his errors can only half obscure, and they rivet their gazes upon that pale and splendid face, the only one, as Scott says, that ever came up to an artist's notion of what the lineaments of a poet should be. He looks around him upon the ethereal and feminine countenance of Shelley, the visionary, the kind, pleasant, honest English faces of Medwin and Williams, the good-looking Italian Gamba, the quaint little Irishman Tafe, last, not least, the dark mustachios, and wildly flashing Celtic eyes of the Cornish adventurer Trelawney. This latter might well have served for a model of Conrad the Corsair, and so he is assured by his companions. Sun burnt his cheeks, his forehead high and pale, the sable curls in wild profusion veil his features' deepening lines and varying hue, at times attracted, yet perplexed the view. But where, they ask, shall the original of Gulnare be found? Gulnare, who stains her hand with the blood of her lord the Pasha, to save the Corsair from a dreadful death. Byron refuses to reveal his source of inspiration, but Shelley quotes with sincere approval the lines which most emphatically delineate the lovely, desperate woman. Embarked, the sail unfurled, the light breeze blew, how much had Conrad's memory to review? He thought on her afar, his lovely bride. He turned and saw Gulnare, the homicide. She watched his features till she could not bear their freezing aspect and averted air, and that strange fierceness, foreign to her eye, fell quenched in tears, too late to shed or dry. But for that deed of darkness, where wert thou? Reproach me, but not yet. Oh, spare me now! I am not what I seem this fearful night, my brain bewildered. Do not madden quite. If I had never loved, though less my guilt, thou hadst not lived to hate me if thou wilt. Extreme in love or hate, in good or ill, the worst of crimes had left her woman still. This Conrad marked and felt, ah, could he less? Hate of that deed, but grief for her distress. And what she had done no tears could wash away, and heaven must punish on its angry day. But it was done, he knew, whate'er her guilt. For him that poniard smote, that blood was spilt, and he was free, and she for him had given her all on earth, and more than all in heaven. The Corsair. But, heavens, Shelley, cries the host, what infinite nonsense are you quoting? And he hastily turns the current of conversation towards more impersonal subjects. The evening wears on, the guests depart. The clear spring moonlight streams upon the winding Arno. Byron stands dreaming at the open window. The bridges and buildings of Pisa lie still and silver-lit before him. A subtle influence of quietude steals down upon him from the stars. What nothings we are, he murmurs, before the least of these stars. One in particular, is it Sirius? Entrances his attention with its cold refulgence of pure light. His thoughts involuntarily shape themselves in rhythm and rhyme. Son of the sleepless, melancholy star, whose tearful beam glows tremulously far, that showest the dark thou canst not dispel, how like thou art to joy remembered well. So gleams the past, the light of other days, which shines, but warms not with its powerless rays. A night beam sorrow watcheth to behold, distinct, but distant, clear, but oh how cold! It is the hour when Byron's brain becomes thronged with the glowing phantasmagoria of ideas that cry aloud for visible expression. He forgets, under the stress of creative impulse, the sources and causes of his inherent melancholy, the miserable days of his childhood, with a fury for a mother, the wound, never to be healed, of his unrequited love for Mary Chaworth, the inimical wife from whom he is eternally alienated, the little daughter that he may never hold in his arms, the beloved sister separated from his side, the ancestral home of his forefathers, now passed into a stranger's hold, the meteoric glory and total eclipse of his unparalleled popularity in England, the follies, and worse than follies, which have made him what he is, consisting in nothing but his passion and his pride. These memories, like poisonous exhalations, are banished from his mind, and leave a clear horizon for a while, a fertile landscape peopled with great words and images. Something akin to inspiration seizes upon him, and he throws himself to work with all the zest and nerve of his impulsive nature. This is a man who writes, in his own phrase, with rapidity and rarely with pains. When I once take a pen in hand, I must say what comes uppermost or fling it away. Not for him that careful polishing of sentences which other writers meticulously bestow. I have always written as fast as I could put pen to paper, and never revised but in the proofs. I can never recast anything. I am like the tiger. If I miss the first spring, I go grumbling back to my jungle. And to this impetuous directness of onslaught, his finest poems bear witness. Some critic has remarked that Byron is too much of the earthy to be a great lyrical writer. Yet a Promethean fire, stolen from heaven, burns immortally through some of his shorter lyrics. In Greek, it is said, there are 1,632 ways of expressing the simple fact, I love you. Yet who has ever put it in a more convincing form than Byron does in Maid of Athens? Maid of Athens, ere we part, give, oh give me back my heart. Or since that it has left my breast, keep it now, and take the rest. Hear my vow before I go, Zdoe mu sas agapo. My life, I love you. By those tresses unconfined, wooed by each Aegean wind, by those lids whose jetty fringe kiss thy soft cheeks' blooming tinge, by those wild eyes like the roe, Zdoe mu sas agapo. By that lip I long to taste, by that zone-encircled waist, by all the token flowers that tell what words can never speak so well, by love's alternate joy and woe, Zdoe mi sas agapo. Maid of Athens, I am gone. Think of me, sweet, when alone. Though I fly to Istambul, Athens holds my heart and soul. Can I cease to love thee? No. Zdoe mu sas agapo. Rapidly as his pen flies over the paper, the torrent of throbbing thought flows faster still. Far on into the night, when ghostly noises echo through the sleeping palace, that ever-gushing and perennial font of natural waters, as Scott has described the genius of Byron, pours forth in reckless profusion, until at last, outspent with energy, he draws a deep breath of exhaustion, and realizes that he is weariness itself. The moon has sunk in Arno. The stars are halfway across the sky. A cold glimmer of dawn is palpitating along the east, as Byron, again to that accustomed couch must creep, where joy subsides, and sorrow sighs to sleep. After a day's fitful fever, he sleeps well, and rest, a few short hours of it, is due to that perturbed spirit which now, o'erlaboured with his being's strife, shrinks to that sweet forgetfulness of life, that sleep, the loveliest, since it dreams the least.